I had mentioned on that last slide, as I was thinking about it, that there was kind of an exporting of Black American culture, which had been taken from the South, brought into these small neighborhoods where it fused together all these different ideas, and then it begins to expand out across America. A great example of this is modern American music. Modern American music has its roots in the Harlem Renaissance, and even before that, if you want to go before the Harlem Renaissance, down into the spirituals and the gospel music of the Deep South and slavery. But what you're seeing here as an example of this would be music, in particular African American music of the time is going to really change America. It's a process. It does take some time, but what you're going to see is musicians like Louis Armstrong take music from the South, often called Dixieland or ragtime, and infuse that with different kinds of improvisation and beats and sounds and create jazz. You're going to see band leaders like Duke Ellington create bands based upon this new sound, talking about how it has to move your soul, it has to give you swing, it has to give you passion, it's got to stir you, you got to feel the music in a way that Americans, especially white Americans, hadn't felt before. You take that and you mix it with singers like Bessie Smith, who was singing the blues, this soulful style coming out of African American slave spirituals, West African slave spirituals, and you have Americans for the first time looking at music that is going to inspire them for generations. Modern day country comes out of ragtime and the blues and Dixieland. It comes out of jazz. Rock and roll emerges from jazz. It emerges from Dixieland. All of these people, even Josephine Baker, becomes the first African American Broadway star, taken in by white audiences, not just in America, but even in places like France. This sharing of culture is the beginning. It's not a revolution, folks, don't get me wrong, but it's a beginning. It's the doors cracking open. And as time passes, we're going to see more and more that African American experience, that African American distinct culture being shared with white America, and white Americans embracing that. It's really going to change who we are as a people. One of the things that also comes out of this time is going to be the way that African Americans begin to fight back against racism. I know that I mentioned before how Langston Hughes and Claude McKay kind of become the first voices of the movement, but those voices are going to inspire others. I'll give you an example of what I mean. At the time, most African Americans voted Republican. They voted for whoever it was, in part because Lincoln was the party that had voted Republican. But as the 1920s move on, African Americans who are still going to cast their vote for Republicans are going to start to demand that Republicans make change, that Republicans actually do more for African Americans than just say, oh, 100 years ago we did give you your freedom. That was great. Yay, Republican Party. But it's now 1920, 1925, 1928. Time to get past that and actually start doing more for us. Start doing things like, I don't know, passing laws against lynching. We know that lynching was still a terrible scourge plaguing the nation. Why doesn't the Republican Party take that on? Why doesn't the Republican Party do something with that? So you're going to really see African Americans push the Republican Party to continue to do more. NAACP especially does that. And other leaders too emerge. For example, Marcus Garvey, a Jamaican immigrant, comes to America and begins to say, you know what? If the Republican Party, the NAACP, they're not going to make change for us, maybe we should stop talking about living in the same place as whites. Maybe we ought to be separate. Maybe we should have a separate state, a separate country. Maybe we shouldn't be a part of this country. Maybe we should get our own place. Maybe we should do that. He calls his organization the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and his message is separation and independence from whites. Look, it's pretty simple. If African Americans can educate themselves on their own without the help of whites, they can get economic success on their own without the help of whites. If we can do that, African Americans can have their own power, separate, away from whites. They're not going to be able to stop us over time if we can do that. He's going to be the inspiration of one leader that's coming out later on, a man named Malcolm X, who says very much the same thing. Marcus Garvey's message is dangerous. This is inspiring to people. The FBI actually investigates him because they're worried about what he's saying. They arrest him for all things for mail fraud and use that to deport him back to Jamaica so he can't spread his message. But the seeds have been sown. And it's going to take a little while, but that is going to grow and it's going to become fertile. And we're going to see in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that civil rights movement blossom. So the Harlem Renaissance is going to be the beginning, the shoot that is just kind of emerging from the earth of the civil rights movement. It's an amazing thing. We'll talk more about it in class tomorrow.